Guys, Lantern here. So, I wanted to show a sneak preview of my most recent Zoo brew, and just where it's at right now, really. Craig Wesco put out a sort of Boros with green list that I kind of liked and then kind of didn't like. And the reason why I didn't like it was, I don't have the list on me to show you right now, but it was basically had Curdape, it had Loom Lion, had what else? A bunch of like Boros-y kind of dudes. But the problem with that was the only two converted mana cost spell was Tarmogoyf, and then the rest of it was burn. It was 20 lands, 20 creatures, 20 burn. And I had two opinions of it. One, the burn was awesome. That was amazing. It was great reach. But the second part was that it ran out of gas so quickly. By turn 3, you were basically top decking. And if someone removed one of your critters, you were basically a burn deck for the rest of the game. You might be able to get away with more sort of efficiency, quote-unquote, by running pretty much 16 one-converted mana cost spells and then 4 Tarmogoyfs in Legacy, where you really top out at 3 mana, pretty much. But in Modern, where you top out around 5 mana, it makes 1 converted mana cost spells way worse. For example, Curdape is a 2/3. In Legacy, Curdape is a 2/3 among cards that are generally tops 4/4s or 3/1 flying Vendilion Click, or 3/2 flying Delver. But in Modern, when you look at a Curdape and you realize, like, you've got, aside from Luxodon Smiters that are running around, but you've also got things like, oh god, I'm trying to have brain fart here. Like anything that Jund runs, really, where you have the 3/3 Olivias that turn into, like, 16/16s. It's just, or like worm coils running around, for example. I think you need a bit more staying power into the game. And so what I've built here is really reminiscent of old Zoo, Legacy Zoo. I've taken away, normally it would be around 20, but I felt like with Experiment 1, and yes, I do think Experiment 1 is better than Figure of Destiny. Experiment 1, for all intents and purposes, is like nerfed Noctowl. Even nerfed Noctowl is better than Figure of Destiny. Figure is better as like a top deck because you top deck it when you've got like 3 mana out. Oh, and then you're like, oh well, I've got a Figure of Destiny that in the time I put it out is a 2/2 or turns into a 4/4. But one of the problems with Craig Wesco's build was Figure of Destiny took just as much effort and actually took out more tempo to play than Experiment 1. See, Experiment 1 rewards you by playing creatures, which was harder in the Craig Wesco build because I feel like 24 creatures is around the minimum you can have in order to rock Experiment 1. I'd even still like to take away maybe one more Lightning Helix or a Boros Charm or a Path to Exile to throw one more creature into this deck. But it rewards you for playing creatures, really. It rewards you for a tempo plan of turn 1 creature, turn 2 at least 1 creature, and turn 3 at least another creature. Figure of Destiny rewards you by putting out a Figure of Destiny and then using it as combat tricks to sort of pump it or pump it into response with things. Either way, if you end up pumping it during your turn, you're losing tempo because where you could be playing more creatures and diversifying your threats, instead you're only making this one bigger, which is fine, but it's not what I wanted to do. Also, the problem with Craig Wesco's build was that you would put out a creature and then you'd have another handful of burn and like lands, and then you would try to attack with it and it would get removed, and then you were basically on top deck burn mode. That's just what you were at, because by the time turn 3, turn 4 rolls around, if you drop down a Curdape, it is not impressive at all, So that was a big issue I had too, as well as the fact that his mana base was, really freaking screwed up, man. It had all Sacred Foundries, had one Stomping Ground, had one Temple Garden, and you're trying to run a Loom Lion and a Curd Ape, for force that you just get Ghost Quartered or any sort of like land destruction, and you're screwed, man. It was like really dumb. And I think when he put that out there, he was basing what he needed for his Boros deck, not a Zoo deck. And for all intents and purposes, the Boros deck can pull you out of some games just because of how much burn is in it. So I liked that, and I incorporated it into a smaller Zoo. I still run Tarmogoyf. I run Voice of Resurgence because in Legacy Zoo you want to run more Qasali Pride Mage, but that has less to do with Qasali Pride Mage being good, even though it is good. It has more to do with the fact that it's good in the meta, as in it destroys Counterbalance and Sneak and Show, which is really important in Legacy. Voice of Resurgence is sort of the same deal. Costs the same, has the same converted mana cost, has the plus side that if it dies, it will probably pump an Experiment 1 again. I've had Experiment 1s before 4s because of a Voice of Resurgence pump. And it also does do what it needs to do, which is it blanks Jun's removal a little bit, but more so takes out a lot of like control decks or tempo decks, which are pretty much all the rage aside from Jund decks. But even Voice of Resurgence is pretty good against Jund because it screws up their removal and their combat tricks. I've cut a Boros Charm, Lightning Helix, and a Path to Exile because I needed more Smiters, and also I'm testing out the Woolly Thoktar. It could be a 4th Smiter if you wanted it to be. But Woolly Thoktar, is a 5/4, which means it will pump Experiment 1 on 3 mana. You'll notice the lack of, aside from Tarmogoyf, the lack of Scavenging Ooze and lack of, the lack of Knight of the Reliquary. That's because Knight of the Reliquary would prefer to have 22, 23 land at least, and also I wanted this deck to be a bit more graveyard resistant, so it's not really dependent on the graveyard too much. I mean, yeah, sure, you can nerf the Tarmogoyf, but then you just side in Rest in Peace, and Rest in Peace is awesome because unlike the other decks which do depend a little bit more on the graveyard, this just nukes sort of Jund strategies really easily. So we're going to go to a game. It's really freaking early in the morning, so there is something. Cool. Join. Modern Tournament. Nope, don't want to do that. Create. Modern. So we need about 2 minutes. If no one shows up, I will cut this recording until someone shows up. Oh, someone did show up. The side's got some cool options in it. I actually forgot to update it. So let's see here. Let's get it back up in here. Test. So this is a really land-heavy hand, but at least I got 2 removal spells, 2 creatures, so I'm worth keeping it. The hands you want to see in here is 2 creatures, 2 removal spells, 2 lands, and then 1 extra card. Well, that sucks that he's mowed down. But what can you do? And what you want to see is at least 1 green source, but the rest primarily being red and white sources. And that's so that way you can, if you need to go on burn-tastical routes, you can. I've been at 4 mana with this. That sucks. I've been at 4 mana with this deck, and as you'll see, Experiment 1's a little bit slower in this deck because I'm going to put out Voice of Resurgence. So that way I maximize him getting into a 3/3 eventually. But I don't figure it being that bad. The reason why is because if it was a Curd Ape, it would be hitting for that much anyways. This is going to be quick. Oh, man. Let's see. We're gonna keep getting our land drops. I'm gonna put that guy down. So you guys might see me just playing around if he really does not get another land and he passes the turn. And I end up getting a creature. I'm going to go ahead and kill my Voice of Resurgence because why not? Cheno? Cheno? I kind of gave him a scalding or a whatever, you know. Let's just end this misery. We don't want to continue this for him. So we saw black from him. Maybe he's a Jund deck. I don't know. We can preemptively take out some stuff. I'm going to preemptively take out those guys because who knows, man. We're going to take out a Pillar of Flame. We're going to replace it with Vines of Vastwood. If he really is a Jund deck, we'd rather go in this configuration. Probably a Domri too, because Jund wins through attrition, so getting a Domri out would help against that attrition. We're going to put a Scavenging Ooze in there as well and take out a Tarmogoyf. See, we're trying to make ourselves a little more independent on the graveyard. So we still have a Tarmogoyf in there. I mean, if we get a Tarmogoyf, we get a Tarmogoyf. I suppose I could put a Thalia in there, but Thalia's siding them in against Jund really depends on what kind of Jund it is. If it's 14 creature and under Jund, then you can totally side them in. If it is the what do you call them? 16 and over Jund, where it's got like Huntmaster and Olivia's, then you don't want to side it in. It's just really bad against that. It could be Rock, which might have Thragtusk and shit, so I might be totally wrong on this one. But I might not be. And Vines of Vastwood isn't something I don't want to see anyways, if this guy has any form of removal. And if he's a Rock, I mean, he's got removal, so it's going to happen. Alright, well, he can keep, so this is fun. Well, maybe he is Rock. Maybe not Rock, but Jund. Alright, so we've got ourselves a nice sort of like dealy here. You can put a turn 1 Curd Ape out, turn 2 Voice of Resurgence, turn 3 Luxodon Smiter. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves, not a Temple Garden with this, because that's what we'd want to get. We're going to grab a Stomping Ground with this. So that way we can still play. And again, we're the aggro deck in this matchup. We're clearly the aggro deck. So we're going to grab ourselves a Stomping Ground. We understand that if we get past like turn 5, it starts to being his game anyway, so it's okay for the life loss. We're going to keep this open so we can Vines of Vastwood if we need to. So the question here is whether we try to stick the Voice of Resurgence prior to removal or whether we blank removal. I think blanking removal is probably better. So we're going to put out the Marsh Flats, and we're going to swing. If he decides to bolt it, we'll go ahead and do that. But there's no bolt. Crack it. We're going to get ourselves a Temple Garden. Again, yeah, there's going to be some life loss in this deck, but we're the aggro, so it doesn't matter too much to me. Voice of Resurgence good here anyways, even if he decides to not do anything. I was giving him the option to do something, like bolt my Curdate prior to Voice of Resurgence hitting the field. Now we sort of screw his combat tricks up if he's got any. Vampire Nighthawk's totally fine because we can bolt that thing. We can bolt that sucker. I think what we do here is we bolt it and then we put a Tarmogoyf out there. It seems to be the best move on our part. Probably crack this for basic is what I'll do at this point. Normally I like to get a basic if I can. Prior to like turn 2 I'll get a basic if it's possible and I've got the hand for it. That one was a little weird though because of the Voice of Resurgence which came later. Otherwise I would have replanned what I was doing. I'm grabbing a basic here just in case mind you. There is some kind of blood moon happening. But a blood moon at this point wouldn't be good for him, I don't think. I mean, could be. He's got a basic swamp out. So Vampire Nighthawk. It seems like, I don't know, maybe he's not Jund. Maybe he's just vampires. Is he vampires? He's Damnation. At least we get a token. I mean, hell, that's fine. I didn't see a Damnation coming out, but it happens. Yeah, that's what we want to do. I don't think he's gonna have any removal for the Smiter. He might have a removal for the Element. I can't deal with that. So again, Voice of Resurgence being great against removal, even against sort of like an attrition-y deck like this could be. Lightning, sure. So maybe this, I don't know what this is, man. Could be Jund, could not be Jund. I don't know. We're going to go ahead and run this guy out there. If he didn't wipe the board, I don't see any reason for him not to. Yeah, I don't know what exactly happened there. Thalia's probably would have been good there. Would have staved him off a turn anyways. But yeah, no, Voice of Resurgence leaves a critter behind, which is important in this deck. I also think we use Voice of Resurgence as a... Voice of Resurgence, we use it a little bit better, I think, because what happens is generally when we put them out turn 2, by turn 3 we will have 3 creatures out there. So if it triggers, we've got a 3/3 or a 4/4. So that's the idea of this deck. Thalia's, I mean, this whole sideboard is in circulation. I could totally, instead of having another Rest in Peace, I have a Scavenger News. But it could be 3 Rests in Peace. Thalia's could go down to 2. The reason why I don't is because I've got 2 Destructive Rivalry, 2 Stony Silences, 3 Graveyard Hates. So it's really good. Plus, this deck does beat up on control pretty easily with the main board Boros Charms. You can transform it so that way what you do is you take out the Pillar of Flames, because those are better against aggro decks and Pod. And then you put in Vines of Astuid, Domri, and your Thalias, and you take out 1 Lightning Helix, because Lightning Helix is best against aggro. If you are playing against Jund, you can do what I did, which was put into, well, we'll just do this then. You just put into Rest in Peace. You go ahead and put in your Vines of Vastwood to null out stuff. You put in your Scavenging Ooze, and you cut out your Tarmogoyfs. And maybe your Pillar of Flames if you want. I would probably do something like that. Leave some Tarmogoyfs in there. Tempo, you don't actually really change much. Depends on the tempo and what you feel. But this deck actually destroys tempo. So it's got a really good game against control, a really good game against tempo. Yeah, we'll keep that. Seems good. Really good game against control, really good game against tempo. Alright game against Jund. Jund is, however, currently the top deck of the meta. At least online, it's like a Jund fest. Experiment one. This hand just got way better. So I might be facing another sort of like Zoo deck, I think. Let's see here. What do we want to put in there? Temple Garden, probably, so that way we can have ourselves... See, but I don't like fetching Temple Gardens necessarily because I think... Yeah, that's better. We're going to do this. We're going to grab ourselves a Stomping Grounds. He's already got something in the graveyard, so it's not like I really care to feed it. I don't know why Deathrite Shaman has an extra point of toughness. It's a utility creature. It should be a 1/1. I guess we're playing against Bant? Probably. Sure. Exile your land, dog. So what we're going to do here is we're going to crack this for a basic. I see no reason not to crack it for anything else. And we're gonna shuffle in this beating is really what we're gonna do. We're gonna say we're racing here. I mean, he's taking all these pains anyways. Spirits are alright, man. But next turn I'll set it up so that way I've got the Lightning Helix to set up bad blocks if he decides to like do any sort of triple block. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I can generally see him trying to do a triple block to kill something. So we'll see what we got here. Tarmogoyf is awful right now because he'd be a little dude. Whatever one's blocking. Let's see here. You can't declare that after. Man, oh man, this guy. Trying to declare shiz. So he's at 10, so we've got him at a 4, quote unquote. So we're just going to lay on the pressure with Tarmogoyf. He can't get rid of everything. So let's see, there's 3 things in the graveyard. Birds of Paradise, sure. I guess I could have put out the Tarmogoyf earlier and then Experiment 1 would have evolved, but that's no big deal. Shit happens. So yeah, we're just going to lay on the pressure here. I mean, I should be at a lower life, probably. Whatevs. I think I'm like that, or something. I mean, he took all this pain from his land base. That was funny. So he's like a tempo-y deck, I guess. Funny is those Tarmogoyfs did not really care about that land. That land hate, man. What did he have? What did he have that was threatening? There wasn't really anything. He's got blue, so I guess Thalias are good here. Scavenging Ooze is probably alright. I have no clue what to side in here. He had Paths, but I couldn't see any other real form of removal. I'm going to assume he's like a tempo-y. Yeah, you know, if he's like a temp, I'd have absolutely no clue. We're just going to keep going. We're 1 game ahead. We'll see if we can get any more of his stuff. Stuff I would have sided in maybe would have been like Thalias, probably. I see blue and Thalias immediately come to mind to screw him over. Domri looks great in that matchup too, probably. But I had no clue it was in his hand. He's just playing a weird deck. Yeah, keep, fine. Got the Boros Charm to null removal. He had no death right, so he's not getting anything. We got ourselves we got ourselves something. We got ourselves something to play with. Let's see here. Got ourselves a Stomping Ground. So I can put out myself, say, experimental one. And then next turn we can put out ourselves another experiment 1 plus a Curd Ape or a Loomline, probably the Loomline. And then we can like double Curd Ape if we really wanted to next turn, or keep it open for the Boros Charm. I mean, I think what I'm playing against is Gifts Ungiven. I think that's what I'm playing against now that I'm thinking about it a little bit. I assume that's what it is. Yeah, we're the aggressors, so we're going to go ahead and take the aggressive stance here. I mean, maybe he's got removal. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, if he's fetching for a basic, you know, that's screwing him from some colors too, which is fine. He's taking 3 damage off of it. That's really stupid anyways. Abrupt Decay, sure, whatever, that's fine. Oh, I really should have put down the experiment 1, but I wasn't paying attention. I mean, it is, like, obnoxiously early. Deathrite Shaman, sure. Deathrite Shaman will meet a Pillar of Flame, turns out. I don't want no Deathrite Shaman. Sure, he could counter this if he's got the ability to, but he's going to be taking land damage then. And I think he knows that. Let's see here. I really do think he's Gifts Ungiven, in which case he's got to put down a land next turn in order to Gifts on my turn, which gives me a turn to attack. So he could wipe the board, but I really do think he's Gifts Ungiven. I'm assuming he's Gifts Ungiven. In which case, I still at least have a turn to attack. If he decides to wipe my board because he's got board wipes or something, then I guess that's fine too. I mean, it's not, but if I attack next turn, I think I win. So we'll see. I mean, that sucks. But I can keep my field alive, regen it if I need to. He did. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Buy himself some time if he's got the ability to do so. You can just attack all out. If he tries to trade, I guess we could Path to Exile, but I'd rather keep the Path to Exile in case he decides to Gifts Ungiven for my for like Elshnorn or something. So I'd rather keep this stuff open. If he decides to trade from Experiment 1, I don't really care. That's fine. Because I'm still sinking in for a crap ton. I mean, we basically undid what he was doing. He's left with a token. He bought himself a turn. And I'm going to keep up the Boros Charm mana, just in case he decides to board wipe. I mean, he's got the ability to. He's got the ability to Supreme Verdict and everything, too. So, if he decides to go for it, then we're going to blow him out of the water with the Boros Charm. If not, it does still last for some shiz. I mean, we're basically going to attrition him out here. I'm going to keep this open because I'd rather have the Boros Charm open. Yeah, I mean, again, if he Elshnorns, I've got the Path to Exile, so it's cool. It's all fine and dandy. I think that costs 4, so unless he has the counterspell in hand. Tap your manas. Path to Exile! Blown out of the water! I mean, that brings him down to 1, and if he does Path to Exile, it brings him down to 3, which I still win. Either way. Good game. Good game. Good game. So yeah, it did end up being a Gifts Ungiven deck. Oh, cool. He rage quit, so that lets me explain a little bit more of the sideboard. So it did end up being a Gifts Ungiven deck. Let's talk about some sideboarding options if you find yourself against a Gifts Ungiven deck. If you find yourself against a Gifts Ungiven deck, they have, other than mana ramp dudes, no creatures. They might have a Tarmogoyf. If they do, you end up putting Thalia in there because Thalia is great against any deck that has less creatures. You take out your Pillar of Flames. You take out your Lightning Helixes because you don't need them. And then you slide in things like Rest in Peace and Scavenging Ooze. And probably Vines of Vastwood while you're at it. And maybe a Domri. Maybe, if you're feeling saucy. But this is really what you should be going for. Probably also Path to Exile over something like a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolts actually aren't that great in this matchup. They end the game, sure. But they really are a one-hit pony. So you do something like that. Against a Gifts Ungiven deck. Against a... Other than a Gifts Ungiven deck for like a Dredge Graveyard deck, you probably put in the Scavenging Oozes, put in your Rest in Pieces, put in your Path to Exile because you're facing against a Dredgy deck, not your Pillars because they help out against Dredge decks. Probably something like Lightning Helixes or Boros Charms. So if I was doing that, yes, you could take out Tarmogoyfs too. But what I would probably end up doing is taking out like 2 Boros Charm, 2 Lightning Helixes, call it a day. Against a tempo deck, depending on what the tempo deck is, if we're talking about like your sort of run-of-the-mill Delver that you run into right now, I would... you can put the Thalias in, you could not put the Thalias in. That's really a matter of choice. But what I would end up doing is, even Domries aren't even that great against that tempo deck because we have so much main deck removal. It's not like we need any more. If they have pretty much nothing but removal, then Domry's a good choice. And I would suggest at that point doing Domry. I actually generally take out my experiment ones against those decks. Because it's less good. I mean, you put it out turn 1, and then you get electrolyzed, and you wish you never did it. Also, this guy's a little bit slower in our deck, so because of Voice of Resurgence being at 2 mana cost. So you want, I would say take him out, put the Domri in, put your Thalias in. You're pretty good there. If you are playing against sort of like a more white-based removal tempo deck, you would do the same thing. You would take out your experiment ones, put in your Thalias and your Domri. And if we're talking about white-based tempo and there's like stuff like whatever that angel is that bounces, I can't flickers, Restoration Angel, you probably take out some like a Pillar of Flames, or 2, and you put in your Path to Exile, and you really don't need your Vines of Vastwood because you're facing a bit more removals. Like there's paths and bolts going your way. Against the Jund deck, if we're talking about we're playing and this is where you need to use your nose to be a detective. You're playing the removal-based Jund, which is going to have like 12 or 14 creatures because it's pretty much only like it's probably only something along the lines of Deathrite Shaman, Dark Confidant, you've got yourself what is it, Tarmogoyf, and then like 2 Scavenging Oozes. then that's the time that you put in the Thalias. So what you're going to do is you're going to unlock here. You're going to put in your Thalias. Probably put in your Scavenging Ooze plus your 2 Rest in Pieces. You're going to take out your Weenie removal because it's not good here. You'd rather be the aggressor. You're going to put in even like another Path to Exile. You'd rather see bolts and paths in that matchup. And if you saw Rest in Pieces, that's fine too. You could even side out some of your Tarmogoyfs if you'd prefer to keep in more removal for like Reach. That's fine too. If you're going against your classic Jund, then the best thing you could do is only side in the Rest in Pieces. So you want to side in the Rest in Pieces, your Vines of Vastwood, your Path to Exile, maybe your Domri because it's going to be a more grindy matchup. You're going to take out your sort of your more basic removal here because you're not against an aggro deck. If you're against Affinity, you're going to want to put in more removal. And against Affinity, you've got a shit ton of removal. You got to remember in that matchup you're the control. So you're going to take out your experiment ones because it's not worth it. You're going to put in your Destructive Revelries, your Stony Silences, and even if you're feeling like it, you could put in your Domri. That's up to you. Again, the Domri in this matchup, not necessarily because of its number 1 ability to look at the top, it's to fight. It's really just more removal. But right now you're looking at a shit ton of main deck removal. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I would probably add in the Path to Exile and the Domri and take out your Boros Charms. Removal is king in this matchup. Eventually you'll drop a Woolly Thoktar or even like a Loom Lion and go to town with it. And see Merfolk. Merfolk is a pretty fine matchup as is. What I would do is I would put in your Path to Exile. I would not put in the Stony Silences or stuff because you're only hitting 1 card and it's not worth it. You'd probably put in the Domri too, again, for its takeaway ability, and you would take out the Boros Charms. Boros Charms are really better against control. And that deck is an aggro tempo deck. So against control, which is probably what you're all waiting for, you want to put in the Thalias. Thalias are great against control. They really screw up the game. You're turning yourself into a much more hate-berry deck. You don't want to take out the Luxodon Smite or anything. What you do want to take out is your Weenie removal. You want to put your Domri back in there. And this is pretty good. This is probably what it should look like. Against Pod, you would want your Stony Silences in. Click the button. You want your Stony Silences in. You're going to want your Destructive Revelries in. You're going to want your Path to Exile in. What you're going to want to take out is probably a Boros Charm and also all your Tarmogoyfs. Yeah, I'm telling you to take out your Tarmogoyfs because in that matchup, Tarmogoyfs sucked. If you manage to... Because you're going to be trying to exile most of their junk. Pillar of Flaming it. You're going to be Stoning Silences and Destructive Revelry. It's really actually not that great. Things like Voice of Resurgence is much better. Because at least it's a 2-2 all the time. You probably also want to put in your 2 Aven Mind Sensors and take out your Boros Charms. That's against all pod variants. It's just better. Against the Melora pod, this stops the pod activation, really. And Chord of Calling. And against the Naya pod, this actually stops the fetch lands, which is somewhat important because they really are mana greedy. Against Splinter Twin, this is where things start getting a little bit more screwed up. I don't actually have much against Splinter Twin, but what I would say is you would put in your Path to Exile, so that way you can path the Deceiver Etcharch. Your Destructive Revelries, because Splinter Twin is their main way of winning. And then you could put in these guys. I would probably put in the Thalias, because it puts them off like counter spells and removal for a little bit, and you take out all your Pillar of Flames. Pillar of Flames are god-awful in that matchup. You'd probably take out your Boros Charms too. And that's what you would probably end up doing. I can't think of anything. Oh, you can actually put your Vines of Vastwood in there too and take out the extra Boros Charm. I always forget Vines of Vastwood is actually really good in that matchup. Yes, it can blow out removal, which will help you win the race game sometimes, but also sometimes you can really trick them because you'll have 2 mana open. They'll be like, oh, well, maybe he's got a Naturalize or a Declamor, and they'll tap down one of your lands. You'll be like, whatever, and then they'll go for the Splinter Twin attach to like win the game, and you're like, Vines of Vastwood with my 1 open mana on your Deceiver Arch, because it does not give hexproof. It says target creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So it actually makes Splinter Twin fall off and does buy you a turn against Kiki Jiki. So those are the general matchups. I'm trying to think. Tron, you would just put in, depending on what kind of Tron it is, you could put the Thalias in there. You could put the Thalias, don't really matter. Buys you a single turn. If you're on the play, what I would do is if you're against Mono Blue Tron, let's divide it up. Mono Blue Tron, then put in these guys, take out your pillars. Probably take out your pillars, put in your Vines of Vastwood. You could do your Destructive Revelries if you want. Against Mono Blue Tron, it's way better to have the Destructive Revelries. You probably want to put in your Path to Exiles, take out your Lightning Helixes. Again, that's stuff against whatever. These guys do more damage, which is why you don't take them out. And it's a race, really, it is. This actually has a really good matchup against Tron because it's still fast enough to not really care about the Tron deck so much. If you're against Green Tron, I guess there really is no big difference. Here is something that you can do, though. I would say take out a Lightning Helix and a Bolt if you are on the play, and then put in the Stony Silences. And the reason why is because they will generally go turn 1 map, Exhibition map, and then if you go turn 2 Stony Silence, you screw them over from their lands. If you're not on the play, they're going to go turn 1 map, you're going to go turn 1 dude, then they're going to go turn 2 crack map in response to Stony Silence, so it's not worth it. That's really it. The deck actually does have some really good games against a lot of the bigger decks in the format. It's just, again, Jund is not necessarily the best matchup for this deck. Reason being is it's a mid-range deck, and there's no Gorklan Rampagers. You could always put Gorklan Rampagers in here instead of things like the Luxodon Smiter, my Woolly Thoktar, if you want a better game against Jund and you've got more Jund. If not, this still is pretty good against Jund because you have this reach, and that's really important. That you are able to kick ass until around turn 5, and by then they should be in burn range. It's not good against combo like Storm. That's where the Thalias are there. I've historically always been really crappy about Storm decks existing somewhere near me. One of my best friends plays Storm decks, so I always have Thalias. But you could cut the Thalia count down to 2 and be pretty safe around it. You'll notice I don't have any extra quote-unquote burn spells that a lot of other people do, like Volcanic Fallout or Bonfire of the Damned or Electro Trickery. I have 1 Path to Exile, and that's sort of just a catch if I need to take out a pillar and put in a path. Domri can count as removal, which is why it's still in there too, because it's a flex spot. But there's no real need to do board wipes because you've got a good matchup against Affinity already with your 2 extra spells that you can pop in there plus the path. And you've got so much main deck removal. Anyways, this is what I'm running. It feels a lot nicer. It definitely feels good again to have sort of control over that reach game. Your Experiment 1 is maybe a half a turn slower. The deck is not nearly as fast as Gruul Zoo. It does pound out some constant pressure, but a removal, as you saw before, doesn't end your game at all, especially with things like Voice of Resurgence. Anyways, guys, I hope you like this version of the deck that I put out there. I'm going to be testing it for a little while longer. I think it's actually really good, and I think it it sort of severs its dependency on the gruel, quote-unquote, colors because of, what do you call it? Because of the shaman. Whatever that shaman is named. It's late, guys. Don't blame me. Good night, and try it out if you can.